السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. النهاردة إن شاء الله مع الجزء الثاني من محاضرة blood vessels of upper and lower limbs، وبتشمل blood vessels of the upper limb. هنتعرف من خلال المحاضرة على main arteries of the upper limb, origin, termination, course and branches of each artery. هنتعرف على superficial and deep veins of the upper limb and determine the beginning, course, tributaries and termination of each vein. We'll start with the axillary artery. The axillary artery is a continuation of subclavian artery at the outer border of the first rib, continuing the arm as the brachial artery. The artery is divided by pectoralis minor muscle in the pectoral region into three parts. First part lies above the pectoralis minor, second part behind the pectoralis minor muscle, and third part below pectoralis minor. It ends at the lower border of the teres major to continue in the arm as brachial artery. The axillary artery gives the following branches. From the first part, it gives the superior thoracic or supreme artery. From the second part, it gives thoracoacromial artery and lateral thoracic artery. From the third part, it gives anterior circumflex humeral artery, posterior circumflex humeral artery to surround the surgical neck of the humerus, and subscapular branch. So the branches can be divided into branches from the first part, which is the superior thoracic, branches from the second part, which is thoracoacromial and lateral thoracic arteries. Branches from the third part includes anterior circumflex humeral artery, posterior circumflex humeral and subscapular arteries. Now we'll discuss the brachial artery. As we said before, it is the direct continuation of axillary artery at the lower border of teres major muscle, descend in the arm to end at the neck of radius by dividing into two major branches, radial and ulnar arteries. Along its course, in the upper half of the arm, the brachial artery lies medial to the humerus, while in the lower half of the arm, it lies in front of the humerus. The brachial artery gives the following branches. Profunda brachii artery, which is the largest branch of the brachial artery, we'll talk about it. Nutrient artery to the humerus, superior ulnar collateral artery, inferior ulnar collateral, and two terminal branches which are radial artery and the ulnar artery. Profunda brachii artery, which is the largest branch of the brachial artery, gives the following branches. Anastomotic branch, anterior descending branch, posterior descending branch. Now we'll discuss the radial artery. It is the smaller of the two terminal divisions of the brachial artery, begins opposite the neck of radius as one of the two terminal branches of the brachial artery. Along its course, it descends on the lateral side of the front of the forearm till it reaches the lower end of radius, where it curves backward on the lateral side of the wrist to reach the dorsum of the hand. The radial artery gives the following branches in the forearm. Radial recurrent artery ascends toward the elbow joint muscular branches to the muscles of the forearm, anterior carpal artery, and superficial palmar branch descends to the palm. So it gives radial recurrent, muscular branches, anterior carpal branch, and superficial palmar branch. The ulnar artery, it is the larger of the two terminal divisions of the brachial artery, begins opposite the neck of radius. Along its course, in the upper third of the forearm, it passes obliquely to reach the medial side of the forearm. Then, in the lower two-thirds, it descends vertically and leaves the forearm to reach the hand by passing in front of the wrist. The ulnar artery gives the following branches in the forearm: anterior ulnar recurrent branch, posterior ulnar recurrent branch, common interosseous, which divides around the interosseous membrane into anterior and posterior interosseous arteries, anterior carpal branch, and posterior carpal branch. So, the ulnar artery in the forearm gives the following branches: anterior ulnar recurrent, posterior ulnar recurrent, common interosseous, anterior carpal branch, and posterior carpal branch. Now we'll talk about the course of radial and ulnar arteries and their branches in the hand. We'll start with the radial artery in the hand. The radial artery, as we said before, curves around the lower end of wrist, the lateral side of the wrist, to reach the dorsum of the hand. After curving to reach the dorsum of the hand, it sinks between the first and second metacarpal bones to reach the palm, where it continues medially in the palm to form the deep palmar arch. Here we can see the artery after curving around the lateral side of the wrist to reach the dorsum of the hand. Then it sinks between the first and second metacarpal to reach the palm. The radial artery in the hand gives the following branches: princeps pollicis to the thumb, radialis indicis to the lateral side of the index, and the radial artery itself curves medially to continue at the deep palmar arch, sharing with the deep branch of the ulnar artery to form the deep palmar arch, which gives the following branches in the palm: palmar metacarpal arteries, perforating branches, and recurrent arteries. So, the radial artery in the palm gives princeps pollicis, radialis indicis, deep palmar arch, which gives palmar metacarpal arteries, perforating branches, and recurrent branches. Now we'll talk about the course of ulnar artery in the hand. After passing in front of the wrist to enter the palm, the ulnar artery divides into superficial and deep divisions. Superficial division is the larger division, which considers the continuation of ulnar artery in the palm that continue in the palm and curves laterally to form the superficial palmar arch after joining the superficial branch of the radial artery, while the deep division is the smaller division which joins the termination of the radial artery in the palm to form the deep palmar arch. In the palm, The branches of the ulnar artery are considered the branches of the superficial palmar arch. They include 3 palmar digital branches to supply the adjacent sides of the medial 4 digits, and palmar digital branch to the medial side of the little finger. Now we'll discuss the veins of the upper limb. The venous drainage of the upper limb, like the lower limb, can be divided into superficial veins and deep veins. The superficial group of veins includes dorsal venous arch, cephalic vein, basilic vein, and medial cubital vein, while the deep veins includes brachial veins and axillary vein. Starting with the superficial veins, we'll discuss the dorsal venous arch. The dorsal venous arch lies across the dorsum of the hand. It receives 3 dorsal metacarpal veins and gives rise to basilic and cephalic veins. The cephalic vein begins from the lateral side of the dorsal venous arch, the hand. It curves around the lateral side of the forearm to ascend in the front of the forearm and arm, and finally terminates in the axillary vein, while the basilic vein begins from the medial side of the dorsal venous arch, curves around the medial border of the forearm, ascends in front of the forearm and arm to join the veiny comitants of the brachial artery to form the axillary vein. The median cubital vein is a short oblique vein that begins from the cephalic vein, ascends upwards and medially to end in the basilic vein, and is the best site for venous cannulation. Now we'll talk the deep veins of the upper limb. They include brachial veins or veiny comitants of the brachial artery and the axillary vein. The brachial veins are 2 veiny comitants accompanying the brachial artery on both sides of the brachial artery. They ascend upwards to terminate in the axillary vein, and they begin by joining or union of the veiny comitants of both radial and the ulnar arteries. The axillary vein begins at the lower border of the teres major muscle as a continuation of the basilic vein and terminates at the outer border of the first rib to continue as subclavian vein.